Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening, downloading, and subscribing to the latest edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. I'm 12 Kyle. Check this out. On this podcast, we're going to take a trip back down memory lane. We're going to visit Doggystyle, the debut album from Snoop Dogg. This album turns 25 years old this year. It's hard to believe, but on November 23rd, 1993, Snoop Dogg dropped this album. And to say that it was a game changer is a huge understatement. I guess before we get into what the album was about and everything that surrounded the album, because there was drama surrounding the album, I want to take you back to the landscape of 1993, particularly November of 1993. It was a very special time in hip hop. Of course, in 1992, the end of 92, December of 92, Dr. Dre releases The Chronic, right? So The Chronic is killing it. It's tearing up the charts. It's hot on the streets. The West Coast is running hip hop. And right in the middle of that is Snoop Dogg. I mean, he makes his debut. He actually made his debut on the Deep Cover soundtrack with Dre. And you know, the first song that he appears on, or at least the first video that he appeared in, was the Nothing But a G thing. And of course, you see Snoop and he's very shy. He's not even looking at the camera and everything. And people, you know, were wondering who this guy was, because he's on the Deep Cover song, and then he's on Nothing But a G thing, and then he's all over The Chronic. And, you know, people were really, really anticipating this album. But that time in hip hop was really, really key because, again, like I said, the West Coast was winning. However, just 2 weeks prior to this album coming out, on November 9th, the East Coast comes back. A Tribe Called Quest drops Midnight Marauders, and Wu-Tang drops Enter the Wu-Tang 36 Chambers. Both of those albums dropped November 9th, 1993. So here comes Snoop 2 weeks later. And I remember this distinctly because Snoop's album was so highly anticipated. The album was actually supposed to be released in December, but they had to move it up because they were fearful of bootleggers. Now, some of you new people, newbies, some youngsters, young Thundercats, you may not know what a bootlegger is, but back in the day, songs and albums were bootleg, meaning that they would be, you know, black marketed on the streets. So you didn't want the streets to get a hold to them, because the streets if they got leaked on the streets, you know, that was less sales for the artist. But just to give you that idea, hip hop at that particular time was extremely competitive. And so again, you got the West Coast running hip hop, and then here comes the East is coming back, and then Snoop is about to drop this album. Now, one of the things that made this album so special was what was happening around its release date. As I mentioned, it was supposed to be released in December. They had to move it up because they were fearful that it was going to be leaked. But the album was so anticipated that, like, people had to have it. Now, one thing that was key about that time and that era, you got to keep in mind, there was no such thing as the internet, right? So you couldn't download the album, you couldn't stream it. You had to physically go purchase either a tape, a cassette tape, or a CD, or the vinyl if you bought vinyl album. So people wanted their hands on this album, but you knew that with the anticipation of it, that if you didn't get that album the first week that it came out, there was a possibility the stores were going to run out. There weren't going to be enough copies. So I distinctly remember going to the record store. The album dropped midnight of November 23rd, 1993. So we're all standing in line outside a record store at the mall. I was in Orangeburg, South Carolina, at South Carolina State University. Shout out to my school, my alma mater. And I remember being in line. I was like the 10th person in line. And like, this was at like 11:30, right? Store open at midnight. I mean, I just want to give you this visual. Imagine a record store having no other stores in the mall open, but a record store having to open at midnight just because of the anticipation of this album. By the time that I made my way in the store and bought the album, when I left the store, the line was out of the store, outside of the store, into the night, down the block. There were literally at least 100 people waiting on this album, waiting to purchase this album. And again, depending on where you bought it, there was a possibility that the album was going to get sold out, because that happened a lot in the 90s. So you really, if it was something that was dope, you really wanted to get your hands on it. You did not want to be the one who did not have this album, because like in this particular case, in this record store where I went, if you didn't get it, and let's say they sold out, it might be a week, maybe a week and a half before the album, before they have more copies. And you would have to keep calling or going up to the record store to get that album. That's just how highly anticipated it was. And it wasn't just in my town where I went to school. This was everywhere across the country. This album in 1993 sold 806,000 copies in the first week alone. That's unprecedented, particularly for a debut album. And again, this is Snoop Dogg. This ain't Michael Jackson. This ain't Prince. This ain't, Bruce Springsteen. Hip hop records didn't sell like this. First week sales didn't happen like this. This was tremendous. Even The Chronic, for as dope as it was, it didn't sell like this in the first week. That was just how highly anticipated and people wanted to get their hands on this album. The demand was crazy. So again, the hype surrounding the album, there's only a couple of hip hop acts that I can remember that had that much hype going into a debut album. I would say Snoop's Doggystyle, 50 Cent's Get Rich or Die Trying, and Nas' Illmatic, in no particular order. And I know 50's album sold extremely well. Illmatic didn't sell like that because, again, people really weren't buying the album, but it was hot on the streets though. But those probably were the most anticipated hip hop albums. But Doggystyle was different because, like I said, people just flocked to the store. You couldn't keep this album on the shelves. Honestly, you just couldn't. And so it was hot and people wanted it. Another thing that surrounded the release of the album was 3 months before the album drops, Snoop gets arrested. Not only does he get arrested, but he's arrested on like attempted murder charges. Snoop was arrested for the attempted or murder. Well, this guy got murdered. This guy that was said to be in a rival gang, Philip Woldemarian. He was alleged to have been stalking Snoop. Snoop was driving his car and Snoop's bodyguard shot him and killed him. They claimed that it was self-defense, but again, this is 3 months before the album drops. So everybody knows that this album is coming. You have, because the first single was Who Am I? What's My Name? That was released October 30th. So that was released a little less than a month before the album dropped. And that was like a number one single. So you got the number one single on the streets. and you have one of the most anticipated hip hop albums, and you're in jail, and you're looking at the possibility of, you know, not only being locked up for a long time, but not even being able to promote this album in the meantime if you don't get out of jail. But he did. And he subsequently spent most of 1995 preparing for the trial. He was subsequently acquitted in 1996. But, you know, you got this guy, one of the hottest rappers in the world, and he's rapping about this gangster shit, and he's on trial for murder. You couldn't, while, you know, and I don't want to glorify it because someone died, and I don't know, you know, if they ever found out who, you know, I don't know if anybody ever caught any charges behind it. I just know that Snoop was acquitted. So I don't want to make light of someone dying, but that just, I mean, it was almost like it was scripted to some degree, even though it wasn't, but you get my point. So you had all of this stuff surrounding Snoop. Not only he's, you know, doing all of that, but he's coming out of the death row camp, and he's rolling with Dr. Dre and Suge Knight and Dog Pound. And so you got all of these things in the mix, and then this album finally reaches our hands on November 23rd, 1993. And it is crazy. It's a phenomenal album. The album, as I mentioned, 806,000 copies sold in the first week. I think it went on to sell like 7 million copies in the United States, 11 million copies worldwide. To say that this album, you know, broke records, I mean, that's an understatement. This album was incredible. Not only did it put, you know, another stamp for Death Row, but another stamp for the West Coast. And, you know, it helped birth the G-Funk era. G-Funk was a style that they had created out there. And the G-Funk, the production, and I'll get into that in just a few, but the production and then Snoop's ability to rhyme, his style and his flow, just, you know, it meshed very well together. So it was a perfect blend. It was a perfect blend and a perfect storm for Snoop. And again, this was something that everybody had. I mean, like, you would be hard pressed at that particular time to find anybody who didn't have this album, because everybody had it. Everybody had the album, and everybody, especially I was on a college campus. Everybody on the campus was bumping it. You couldn't walk to class. You couldn't go walk through the dorms and not hear a song from Doggystyle. So I tell you what, let's take a quick commercial break. And on the other side of the break, we'll break it down, man. I'll talk about the production and the tracks and tell you why this album is significant and what happened to Snoop Dogg after this album dropped. Sit tight. We'll be back in just a second.
That was the Dog Pound here right on W Balls 187.4 on your FM dial. You're tuned into the biggest balls of them all, DJ Saw T-Nuts. Hey, don't forget about my homeboy Easy Dick in the Jack Off Hour. That's happening at 12 o'clock tonight. Right now, we got some new Snoop Doggy Dogg for that ass. This one is called The Shiznit. You're about to go downtown, bitch, right here on the station that plays only platinum hits. That's 187.4 on your FM dial. If you're licking, that's W Balls.
And just like that, we are back. Once again, it's your boy 12 Kyle, the 12 Kyle podcast, and we're talking about Doggystyle 25 years later. Before I get started, I got to give a big shout out and say rest in peace to Ricky Harris. You heard him right there on the interlude, DJ Saw T-Nuts from radio station W Balls. He was on quite a few of the interludes and skits on this album, not just on this album, but the Dog Pound album as well. Very funny brother. You remember him from the video Doggy Dog World. He was Tat Al. Yeah, man. He passed away a few years ago, man. Funny guy. And like I said, he was all over some of the Death Row projects, so lending his voice and his impersonations. So big shout out to him and rest in peace. This album, again, like I said, very anticipated, but not only that, it delivered. I think it goes without saying that everything that we were waiting on this album to be, it was, and much more. As far as the production, Dr. Dre is credited with being the producer of this album. He produced almost all of the tracks. Now, if you look at the liner notes, Daz is credited on quite a few tracks as well. It has been long rumored that Daz did most of the production on the album and Dre just kind of came in and co-signed on it. I don't know how it went. Honestly, a lot of this sounds like Daz more so than it does Dre. But I'm gonna roll with it. I'll say Dre and Daz. The production on this album is perfect for Snoop. The G-Funk sound actually fits Snoop very well, wherein there were some tracks on the Chronic that was a little bit slower and Snoop had to slow his style up a little bit. He didn't necessarily have to do this. He has that, kind of singing type, flair to some of his rhymes. And I thought it fit Snoop well. The album starts off, with the interlude and then the G-Funk intro with the legendary George Clinton, Dr. Dre, and the Lady of Rage, who actually kills it when she gets on this track. She was in the Death Row camp, man. Shout out to Rage. Again, that track, that was a great start off to the album. And then we roll into track 3, which was Gin and Juice, featuring Daz. And I gotta say, Gin and Juice it's a staple on this album, and everybody loved it, and the video was dope. But I think, when you look at the total landscape, it was back then, I can say that it was one of my favorite songs. As the time has gone on, it's not as big a favorite of mine and I guess probably because I've heard it a gazillion times, but it's a very nice, solid start to the album. And then the aforementioned skit, W Balls, with my man Ricky Harris. And then that rolls into track 5, The Shiznit. Man. Now, Dre produced this one, and Snoop was just, he was flowing. He was flowing in this one. I love this song. This song, I think I've probably grown to have a deeper appreciation for as time has moved on a little bit. And then you get the domino intro, Cash just sitting around playing dominoes, talking shit. Then we go to track 7, Lottie Dottie. Snoop actually covers Slick Rick's classic song, Lottie Dottie. Now, I'll say this. There are quite a few people, I don't want to say a few, there's a good bit of people that didn't like the fact that Snoop covered Lottie Dottie. One in particular, my homeboy Eclectic. Shout out to E. He can't stand Snoop for this for this reason alone. But I thought he did a great job, man. It was slow. They slowed it down. It had that gangster style. And, I loved it. I still love it to this day. I still play it. But it was some people that didn't like, and I felt like I thought it was a really good job for Snoop to kind of give a nod to not only the East Coast, but guys who paved the way. And Snoop has said on numerous occasions that one of the guys that he looked up to in the rap game was Slick Rick. So that was just in my eyes, it looked to me like he was paying homage to Slick Rick. So I have no beef with that at all. Then we go to track 8, Murder Was the Case, featuring Daz. This song was very powerful. Obviously, the song starts off with a drive-by. Eerily starts off with a drive-by. This song was powerful because, again, and I'm not even sure when it was recorded, but you got a song called "Murder Was the Case," and then you have Snoop with a murder charge pending against him at the time of the album being released. And we all remember the iconic moment on the MTV Music Awards when Snoop performed this song with a gospel choir in the background. And he ended the performance by saying that he was innocent. And then the lights dropped. And it was really cinematic and everything. And, that was before the trial actually happened. But Murder Was the Case, man. Love that song. Love it. It still goes hard to this day. Then we move into track 9, Serial Killer, with the DOC, RBX, and the Dog Pound. This one, whoo, man, this one is so hard. This track goes so hard. And this is one of the tracks where I think the Dog Pound actually kind of overshines. They kind of outshine Snoop a little bit on this track. And you could make a case that happened, and that happens in hip hop. I'm not knocking Snoop for that, but I mean, like, it was just, you could tell at this particular time, cats like RBX, Dog Pound, Daz, and Corrupt. I love listening to Corrupt rhyme. They were just hungry, man. I mean, like, they were really trying to prove a point. And so that song is so cold, and it's still hard to this day. Then we move into track 10, Who Am I? What's My Name? As I mentioned, that was the lead single. Of course, you got the George Clinton sample. Had a video for it as well, and typical Snoop banger. I mean, it bangs, and it still bangs to this day. And if you play it in the club, people still are gonna move to it. Then we go to track 11, For All My Nuh and My Bitches, featuring Dog Pound and Lady of Rage. This one, Corrupt kills everybody. Corrupt kills Snoop, he kills Daz, he kills Lady of Rage. I mean, like, I don't really know what to say. I love his verse on that. And one thing that, is constant throughout this album, is bitches and hoes. Some people had a problem with Snoop and his misogynistic views and the way that he talked in the album. I've often said this album, is not, looking back on it, 25 years later, there's some rhymes and there's some things that said that, people just don't rhyme like that anymore. I don't necessarily think that you got to say, that you got to be referencing bitches and hoes in every song. But, in 1993, that was pretty commonplace. And so, back then we just kind of chalked it up. We didn't really, we ain't really pay too much attention to it like that. So, and I don't think people really took that, at least from what I could tell, didn't take a lot of offense to it. But, his content, I mean, outside of the fact that Snoop can rhyme, his content was going to be, smoking weed, getting drunk, messing with chicks. That was it. I mean, like, he wasn't, he was no threat to Rakim as far as content was concerned, but it was some hot, dope ass lyrics over some hot, dope ass beats. And that's what we wanted. And, people still loved it, man. And again, I think that content was probably more closer to what people were talking about in that particular era. Again, 25 years later, I'm not offended by the music at all. And so I just kind of, put it in the capsule in which it was. Track 12. Ain't no fun if the homies can't have none. This song is one of the hardest, rawest, nastiest, crass, misogynistic songs in the history of hip hop. And we loved it. When you start off with Nate Dogg's verse, if you play it in a club, and I've seen it played in the club hundreds of times, if you play it in a club, the ladies will sing along and sing it word for word and not even care. You know, because I guess they figure like, okay, he ain't talking about me. But yeah, it's very misogynistic. It's very crass. It's very crude. But it's so dope. I'm sorry. It's still dope to this day.
You're back now at the Jack Off Hour. This is DJ Easy Dick on W Balls. Right now, something new by Snoop Doggy Dogg. And this one goes out to the ladies from all the guys. A big bow wow wow. Cause we gonna make it a little misty here tonight. This is DJ Easy Dick on the station that slaps you across your fat ass with a fat dick.
When I met you last night, baby, before you opened up your gap, I had a respect for your lady, but now I take it all back, 'cause you gave me all your pussy, and you even licked my balls. Leave your number on the cabinet, and I promise, baby, I'll give you a call. Next time I'm feeling kinda horny, you can come on over and I'll break you off. And if you can't fuck that day, baby, just lay back and open your mouth. 'Cause I have never met a girl that I love in the whole wide world. Well, if corrupt gave a
Of course, Nate Dogg, rest in peace. Warren G and Corrupt. Man, that is a classic West Coast song. That might be the staple of this album. And you know what's always interesting to me is when I hear radio stations trying to you really can't play this song on the radio. You shouldn't. But I mean, hell, if you play it, you got to beep out damn near all of the song. You got another intro for track 13, and we go to track 14. Doggy Dogg World, Snoop Dogg, the Dog Pound, and the Fabulous Dramatics. I thought this song was really dope, man. I mean, the video was so cool. But I think one of the things that was cool about this song was that, again, Snoop was a guy who grew up like most of us, grew up in the 70s and 80s and had parents who played music from the 70s around the house. So, you know, and I said this, you know, on a previous podcast, is that one of the great things about this particular era of hip hop was that a lot of the music that we got reintroduced to was, you know, the Parliament, the George Clinton, the Isley Brothers, that music that we heard as kids, you know, while our mom and dad were playing cards and whatever, you know, having parties at the crib or whatever the case may be. And we were reintroduced to that music through these samples. And so having the dramatics on, like I remember hearing dramatic songs in my house, and then hearing them on a track with Snoop was really, really dope. And, you know, that's something that happened 25 years ago, but probably doesn't happen at all in hip hop now. And that's kind of sad. And then you go to the Classroom intro skit. And then we go to track 16, G's and Hustlers. This is my favorite song on the album. The beat, Snoop's flow, I love it. This, hands down, is my favorite song on the album, even to this day. I love it. I play it all the time, man. G's and Hustlers, you can't go wrong with that. Still hard to this day. Then we go to track 17, Checkin', and then track 18, G's Up, Hoes Down. Now, the interesting thing about G's Up, Hoes Down is that there was a sample issue. So if depending on when you bought this album, it may or may not be on your album. Like, I know, like, it's on my album here, but when I looked on Spotify, it's not on there. And it was because it was some type of sample issue that some sample couldn't get cleared. So it does not appear in some streaming services. But G's Up, Hoes Down. And then the album ends, track 19, Pump Pump with Lil Malik. And that was dope. I like that. Lil Malik from the group Illegal, Malik and Jamal. I thought Malik held his own, rhyming with Snoop. And that was a pretty good closeout to the album. Again, this album, man, it's hard to believe it's been 25 years because I literally remember standing in the line at the record store to cop this album. And again, everybody had it and everybody loved the album. Everybody that I knew who had the album loved the album. I think it goes without saying that this is Snoop's best work. At least to me it is. And it is mind-boggling to me that Calvin Brodus Jr. went from ain't nothing but a G thing, barely looking into the camera, appearing to be very shy, to creating this masterpiece called Doggystyle. And some 25 years later, he has a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. I mean, like, you can make a case that Snoop Dogg is one of the most popular rappers of all time. I won't say he's the most popular, but he's probably one of, if you got a top 5 popular rappers, Snoop Dogg is in that top 5. Your granny probably knows who Snoop Dogg is. Snoop Dogg has done a TV cooking show with Martha Stewart. I mean, I don't know. He was Snoop Lion at one point. He was a Jamaican, I guess. I don't know what he was doing. He made a gospel album. Snoop, I don't know how many times someone can recreate themselves, but he's a brand. And he's still making music. I know at one point in time, Snoop was DJing in Las Vegas. And then he did the reality show with his son, and his son was playing football. I mean, Snoop, he coaches youth football and everything like that. He's a huge football fan. Snoop, it's amazing to see the growth in the 25 years. And he's often said, that trial changed everything for him. Being, acquitted, he knew he had to change his game, and he did. And, he left death row, went to, No Limit, left No Limit, and did his own thing. And I mean, Snoop has just been, he's been an icon. But as far as music is concerned, this album is very significant. Again, this was the start of the G-Funk staple. This was the start of the G-Funk era with this album. It helped, sustain the West Coast dominance. It put a lot of rappers on the map. And it did a lot. And I remember, I think the Source gave it 4.5 mics. If I had to give this album mics, I'd probably say it's a 4.5. I couldn't give it a 5 because looking back on it, Snoop does have a lot of guest features on here. I mean, like, you can't have a 5 mic album with, all of these songs and somebody is on like every other song. But nonetheless, man, it's a dope album. I would encourage all of you, if you have not listened to this album in a while, pick it up and listen to it again, man. I mean, you'll be able to take something from it. this album has aged extremely well. Again, once you get past the subject content, and that if you put yourself in that time capsule, if you were around, or if you could come outside in, in 1993, you'll understand why Snoop was rhyming about what he was rhyming about and why it sounds the way it. But it's still a feel good album, and again, I still love playing it, man, and I still play it to this day. Again, Snoop Dogg, Doggystyle, 25 years later. Thank you for listening. Once again, it's your boy 12 Kyle. I'll catch you guys on the next go round. 5 G's.